Wallowa County, Oregon Chestnumus, the gateway to Hell's Canyon. Near Joseph, September 2000, mid-morning and late night. I am not the person who saw the creature. I am reporting what a coworker has told me. I believe what he says. My coworker and his son were archery hunting in Northeast Oregon. They walked to the end of a ridge overlooking a small, sparsely forested valley. As he was looking over the valley for game, he saw a tree, which had fallen and was leaning over another fallen tree. He said the tree was pointed up at about a 30-degree angle. He saw that something had just moved the tree. He said it was bouncing pretty good. He figured a bear was trying to get at grubs that sometimes live in rotting wood. He and his son decided to make their way closer to the tree to catch a glimpse of the animal making the tree move. As they were making their way towards for the tree, they heard something behind them. The noise came from where they just were. He turned around to see what made the noise. As he turned, he saw what he thought was another hunter about 60 yards to their right, walking across an open hillside. My coworker blew on his cow call to get the figure's attention. The figure totally ignored him. He blew on the call again, but still the figure ignored him. At this point, he was annoyed that another would not acknowledge him, so he decided to walk in the figure's direction. He said as he walked towards the figure, it bolted and ran into the timber. My coworker ran to where the figure went into the timber. He figures the figure was only 30 yards from him when he stopped where he last saw it. The figure then ran. My coworker ran after it. He said he could hear it running through the brush and trees. Whatever it was, it sounded heavy. He figured he ran about 50 yards after it. When he stopped running, the thing was at least 100 yards ahead of him and still running. It was making a lot of noise going through the brush and trees. At first, he didn't realize what he saw. He figured it was Hunter in full camouflage. Then he realized the hunter wasn't carrying a bow or any other type of hunting equipment. And he said there was no way a man could move that fast through that kind of brush and trees. He also says it made too much noise as it was running. After he realized it was a Bigfoot, he and his son went back to look for tracks or any other evidence. There were no actual tracks, just torn up pine needles and busted limbs. The only other thing they found was a semi-fresh dead elk that looked like it had been eaten on by some animal. We have talked about this incident numerous times. He believes what he saw was a Bigfoot. He figures the Bigfoot that made the downed tree move. It most likely winded him or saw him, and it circled around behind him and his son. He said he had just relieved himself before he saw the tree moving. He thinks the Bigfoot circled back around him, got a good smell of the urine, and decided to leave the area. Since he and his son were in full camouflage, he thinks the Bigfoot didn't see him as it walked across the open hillside. Once he moved, the Bigfoot saw him and tried to get out of sight. It was blackish-brown in color. This is a second event and was told to me by another co-worker who was hunting in the same general area. I'm not sure of the year. It was within a year of the other co-worker's sighting. According to my co-worker, he and a friend were in their tent trying to sleep. He said at around midnight, he and his friend were awoken by a loud noise that started out as a low growl and gained pitch until it sounded like a scream. He said the noise would happen at about 20-second intervals. He said whatever was making the noise was making its way past the camp. He guesses it was between 50 and 75 yards away from the camp, skirting the campsite. It continued making the noise until it got about 200 yards away. Then it stopped making the noise. My coworker said it sounded like whatever was making the noise was mad, that someone was in its territory and was trying to scare them away. They were the only people in the area. The nearest groups of hunters were camped about 5 miles away. These two individuals would like to be kept confidential. I will ask the individual who saw and chased the Bigfoot if he will let me give you his name. I have every reason to believe he saw a Bigfoot. Neither person I talked to notified anybody about what they encountered. In fact, the individual who saw the Bigfoot didn't say anything to anyone for about a year. Encounter 2, Willippa Hills, near Grays River, Washington, off Y-1001, November 1978, after 4:30 p.m. The terrain was described as remote old-growth timber, with deep carpet of pine needles beside a small river, just around dark. Closest water source, river, tributary of Grays. River. Myself and my hunting partner, whom I will call DW, was hunting elk in this area, which was old-growth timber, about 3 to 4 miles from the nearest logging road. We had started early that morning and had jumped a large herd of elk which contained several large bulls, but were unable to get a shot. We decided that we would wait until the late afternoon when the elk returned to this area, as we wanted the large 5-point bull that was in that herd. Since we were using muzzle loaders or black powder rifles, we knew that we wanted a close shot, so we stayed down by the river as to conceal ourselves. Well, the elk never showed, so we had just started our hike out of the timber, following the river, as there was more daylight showing. I was in the lead, going around a tree in the trail, when I came face to face with a large creature with bright red eyes, which were at least 24 inches over my head. The creature turned and was out of sight in less than 30 seconds, and boy, was I scared. DW and I still had at least 2 more miles to hike out, and this was the same way the creature had fled. We both decided to give this thing some time to clear out of the area before we started to leave. Needless to say, we were extremely glad to get back to the truck that evening. The creature we both saw was at least 7 feet tall, possibly more, had bright red eyes, which kind of glowed in the near dark light conditions that we were in. This creature, which turned in front of me less than 6 feet away, was a real Hulk. Big barrel-chested, massive arms and shoulders, and the really impressive fact was, it never made a sound when it turned to leave. It just seemed to float away. It was very hard to keep calm, but I knew almost as soon as I saw those red eyes what this creature must be. I have hunted and fished this country for years and have never had anything like this happen before, but I truly wish I could see him again, and may yet. We have only told a few friends what happened that evening, and only tonight I felt compelled to write to your email address to share this story with others who may have similar experiences, but choose to keep them to themselves. I urge you to let others know of your sightings, DW, and myself know what we saw, and are more certain every day that all of the outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, and etc. share the forests with these creatures. Encounter 3. Walla Walla County, Washington, Blue Mountains, 27 May 1990. Lewis Peak, Black Snake Ridge Road, morning 2 hours after dawn. Raining. Mountains, steep mountainside, wet footing, slippery. Sasquatch in open sitting. Notified. Dr. Grover Krantz, pen pals, family, and other Sasquatch researchers. Having sighted a Sasquatch previously and seen that they do indeed sit and watch, sometimes I could identify what I saw. It was no bear. I observed it for some time before going on, and later went back after it had dried up and found Sasquatch prints at the exact area I saw it sitting. Being able to know nothing belonged in that open meadow or mountainside was very relevant to being able to spot something that didn't belong. The creature was very large, long-legged and solid, brown. My previous experience having also seen butt prints in the grass across the tree from the large Sasquatch that lay lengthwise, I was not surprised to see one sitting. Good observation point for the Sasquatch. Nobody could sneak up on it. This is the second sighting of 3 I have, copied from a letter I sent to Dr. Krantz. A Sasquatch sighted again, this time on May 27, 1990, on a slope of Lewis Peak. Was a rainy day about 2 hours after dawn. I was out riding my 2 horses, riding and leading one. I'd ridden from our cabin along the watershed trail. It was in an open meadow just sitting, was directly below Lewis Peak on a slope facing Walla Walla. Just sitting. When I first noticed it, I was curious. Again, as before, nothing belonged in that meadow, especially something big. We've seen a lot of bears in the last 3 years. As an example of bear population, we saw 6 bears in 2 days this last weekend. So I know what bears look like on a slope for several hundred yards. Way they move, body configuration. This was quite dark brown, not black, just sitting upright. Far too big for a bear, and I don't know how to describe it, but it was an animal. A very large one, sitting upright, not moving, or not that I could discern at that distance. No bear is that large, and no bear I've seen can stand upright or sit upright in that position that long. My first instinct on sighting it was a Sasquatch, and I only became surer of that fact. Not being able to see well enough to suit me as I pulled off several horse lengths from the trail, I continued up. Was in the last big meadow, before going up the final ascent to Lewis Peak Gate. I went through the gate, which was on the ground, and down to the dip between gate and where you ascend to the top of the peak itself. I could still see it sitting in the same place, still but an animal. I wanted to get closer. It was starting to sprinkle, very overcast, and if you're aware of our weather, it's been wet for weeks. I thought, well, maybe I can descend to a lower area and work closer. But when I started to descend, the ground was so wet and steep, my horse started slipping bad, and it wasn't in the worst descent yet. Going further down would be extremely hazardous, so I gave up getting closer. I know of no way to get a closer view from there unless you could descend or walk, and I wasn't going to walk down there alone. So I went back to the shed trail, went towards Green Peak, got almost to the top before I had to turn around, due to snowdrifts remaining across the trail. Was sprinkling harder now. Back at the Lewis Peak Gate, about an hour from when I'd left it, I again went out the gate to where I had observed it the last time. It was gone. I assure you it was no bear but a Sasquatch. I was reluctant to mention it to anyone until I had mulled it over for a while. I finally told Mike last Friday, as we were again going to the cabin. I just thought you might be interested to learn of this sighting. It isn't much, but it might be of interest. Isn't worth sending anyone down there, I don't think. Too old. I hope next time I don't delay mentioning it, but I had to mull it over. Last time I had footprints and other people the day before to help substantiate my sighting. This time, only my word. Had to think if I wanted to stick my neck out. Like Diane, you have to think about what you saw a few hundred times to see if you can find any other explanation. I kept coming to the first one. A Sasquatch. The wind was going the wrong way for the horses to smell it, so they were unable to offer an opinion. Postscript. I went back where I saw it after the ground dried, and I actually found prints. Thanks for watching.